This is our anthology series, where we explore the best speculative fiction from around the world. Today we have a story from C. Robert Cargill. The Glass Concord was not signed, it was remembered. No parchment, no seal, no witness could affirm its origin. That night he vanished. In his place stood a perfect replica, dressed in velvet, speaking as he had, but his wife noted something peculiar. He blinked once every 31 seconds, never more, never less, and he never entered the chapel again. Others followed. Second, the words that burned on his tongue, sharp and hot, but ever fading from the grasp of memory. Never trust the reflections. Never trust the reflections. Third, the day the sky rained glass, a midwife sang the Queen's name over a newborn's crib. The infant ceased to age. Her crown was new then, fashioned of polished bone and wreathed in dead flowers. Her gown, once crimson, was faded to rust. Pale skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones, framed by wisps of dusty white hair escaping her crown. Eyes like chips of obsidian, sharp and cold, regarded him steadily, piercing the veil of his fear and loathing. At first, they came alone, cloaked figures slipping into the night, their faces obscured by hoods and masks. But then they came in greater numbers, 2 and 3 at a time, then dozens, then hundreds. He knew then that he could never leave, that the Queen would never leave him. He knew he would spend the rest of his life searching for her, for all of them. She remembered all of them, because remembering was resistance, and resistance was rebellion. Rebellion required a leader, and she was their queen. He was only 12 years old when he made that vow, and yet the lines on his palms and the room in his eyes tell a different tale. Their ranks swelled until they spilled out into the streets, clamoring over each other to press forward. Beside him, the old bow he had found discarded near the fountain, its grip worn smooth by countless hands, its limbs as resilient as ever. He notched an arrow and sent it singing toward the fading light, burying itself deep in the crumbling masonry. The Queen was right. He was the last mirror-maker left in the kingdom, the last who remembered the rain of glass, the last who remembered her. Soon he would be the last who remembered anything at all. The beggars and the barkeeps, the weavers and the warriors, the scholars and the rogues, all pressed toward the square, surging and shifting like a tide of humanity. He felt exposed, laid bare, and yet not alone. Where has she gone? Why has she abandoned us? How can we serve her better? And always rising above the rest, clear and strong, like a beacon cutting through the fog, rang the Queen's voice. Find me, find me, find me, find me, find me. For the first time since the rain of glass, he saw someone else who remembered. A young woman in a faded blue gown stood beside the Queen, cradling a longbow as if it were a babe. Her cheeks were stained with soot, mirroring the grime upon the Queen's crown. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, dark and fathomless. Only she looked away first, averting her gaze as she mouthed silent words to the Queen. Words Elle could not hear, but somehow understood, and one sleeve hung tattered and incomplete. Even from afar, Elle knew he should turn back, that any moment she might raise her head and see him there. Back then, Elle thought himself clever, biding his time before returning to the safety of the march. But in the months that followed, he found himself drawn to the ruins again and again, each time hoping, dreading, to catch another glimpse of the Queen. Once he brought his bow, hiding in the shadows of a toppled statue, but the fountain was empty. Again and again he returned. To what end, he could not have said. What purpose could he hope to serve? Was he merely curious, or had some instinct taken root in him, urging him to return to his Queen? But curiosity had taken root in his heart and blossomed into reckless defiance. He wanted to see if she would find him. He wanted to know if she could. "What's that?" he had whispered, pressing his cheek against the cool, damp stone. His mother's hand had clamped over his mouth. "Don't ask," she hissed. "Don't breathe." And then the rumbling had come, like distant thunder, followed by an unnatural hush. "It's done," his mother breathed, collapsing to her knees. "They're done with us." She cradled her son close, shielding her daughter behind her skirts. But when El opened his eyes, blinking away the dust motes dancing in the dim lamplight, he saw that his mother and sister were gone. There was only the shard in his chest and the burning words on his lips. A librarian heard the third bell, by mistake, having dozed off in the archives. He was 7 years old, the first time he saw the Queen. He had been foraging in the West March, just beyond the city walls, gathering herbs for his mother's poultices. The weeds knew no concord there. They grew fat and rank amongst the rubble and cinders. He had been careless, picking a sprig of nightshade, and the thorns had torn through his worn leather gloves, drawing blood. Panic seized him. Blood meant attention. Attention meant the soldiers. The soldiers meant pain. He ran. He ran until he reached the market square, stumbling over the uneven cobblestones, dodging beggars and stray dogs. When she awoke, the ink in every book had melted into the shape of her face. And yet no war came, no decree, only consensus, as if the memory of punishment was enough. And yet every noble house, every living branch of the fractured realm abided by its rules, without question, without knowing why. The rules were few, yet immutable. No reflection shall be trusted. The third bell of midnight must never ring. No one may speak the Queen's name aloud on the anniversary of her coronation. These rules were not enforced. They were obeyed. It began when Lord Emmerich of Rothold dared to restore a shattered mirror in his ancestral hall. In the capital, a new material emerged, called cinder glass by the craftsman. It shimmered like water, could hold shape like steel, and was used to rebuild the eastern spires. But it had a flaw. It absorbed voices, and so, 40 years later, when the Queen summoned the last mirror maker to mend the great looking-glass in the throne room, no one paid much heed. He was an old man then, blind in one eye and deaf in one ear, and though his hand still trembled with the old magic, the years had leached his memories dry. Still, there were 3 things he remembered well enough to fear. Any words spoken near it would fade from memory. After 10 seconds, none could recall what had been said. Yet the Queen insisted it line every chamber of court. This was the true concord, not a treaty of ink and word, but of silence and surrender, of minds reshaped by absence. In time, the people stopped resisting. Then they stopped remembering, and soon they stopped knowing they had forgotten at all. First, the obsidian shard that pulsed in his chest, a throbbing echo of the Queen's own power, a punishment for a crime he did not commit. He had been a boy then, hiding in the root cellar with his mother and sister. He remembered the Queen's face that day. He remembered it well. There, mounted atop the crumbling fountain, sat the Queen. He remembered the look on her face that day. And then the Queen was gone, vanished back into the depths of the fountain. El remembered that he was not the only one who sought her out. He remembered the questions that echoed in the night, desperate pleas carried aloft on the wind. When El heard those words, he knew the Queen had not abandoned them. She had merely slipped through their fingers like sand. When the Queen summoned him, he had already been waiting, watching the sunset bleed across the horizon, staining the western spire with hues of rust and blood. But while the obsidian shard throbbed in his chest, and the words burned on his tongue, and the sky gleamed like polished bone, he knew the Queen still remembered him. And so he waited. For what end? He could not say, But even as the crowd thinned and the whispers faded, he stayed.